ready to dive deep into this whole carnivore diet thing. It's pretty wild, right? All meat, all the time.
It's definitely getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, people are either like totally fascinated or completely grossed out. So is it just another fad, or could this actually be like the future of food?
Well, that's what we're here to find out.
Exactly. And we've got some really interesting sources to help us unpack it all. We're talking doctors, passionate advocates. We'll even take a look at how some athletes in indigenous cultures have thrived on meat for, like, centuries.
It's about looking at it from all angles, you know?
Totally. No agenda here. Just try and understand what this carnivore thing is all about.
Sounds good to me.
So first things first, let's talk about the history of human eating habits. I mean, we've been eating meat for a long time, right?
Oh, yeah. For most of our existence, we were hunters and gatherers, and meat was definitely a key part of our diet.
One of our sources, Ken Berry, MD, even says that meat is the food we've eaten the longest as a species. Kind of makes you think, huh?
It's true, and think about it. During the Ice Ages, plants were scarce. So early humans relied heavily on meat for survival.
It's like try explaining broccoli to a caveman.
Exactly. Their focus was on getting those essential nutrients and calories, and meat was the most reliable source.
Okay, so let's say you're intrigued and want to try out this carnivore diet. What exactly are you allowed to eat, and what's off limits?
Well, according to Anthony Chaffee, MD, it's pretty simple. Meat, water, salt. That's it. You can add some organ meats if you want, but that's the basic framework.
Hold on. No plants at all. Not even a little salad or some fruit.
Nope. The no plants rule is kind of the whole point here.
So we're talking no fruits, no veggies, no grains, nothing.
Exactly. And that also means no sneaky plant-based ingredients hiding in sauces, seasonings, or drinks.
So even honey is out.
Right. You got it. Even though it's made by bees, it's basically just concentrated plant nectar, and it's packed with fructose. The goal is to keep it strictly animal-based.
All right, so no cheating with the honey. Got it. But I got to ask, what about all those health concerns we hear about when it comes to eating tons of meat? Like kidney stones, kidney disease, and insulin resistance.
Those are definitely valid concerns, and they come up a lot when people first hear about the carnivore diet.
Yeah, that seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
Well, some of our sources had some interesting things to say about that.
Okay, like what?
Well, when it comes to kidney stones, Dr. Ford Brewer, in his video, talked about a meta-analysis that showed no increased risk of kidney stones with unprocessed meat consumption.
So maybe it's more about the type of meat you're eating.
Seems like it. And then, with kidney disease, Dr. Brewer actually pointed to studies that suggested animal protein might actually be linked to a reduced risk of death from kidney disease.
Wow, so the opposite of what we usually hear.
Yeah, it's all about context.
Yeah.
And then there's insulin resistance. It's important to remember the difference between the standard American diet, which is loaded with processed foods and refined carbs, and a low-carb, meat-centric diet like the carnivore diet.
So you're saying if you're ditching those processed carbs and sugars and focusing on meat, your insulin response might actually improve.
Exactly. The carnivore diet challenges a lot of our assumptions about what a healthy diet should look like.
Speaking of challenging assumptions, one of the biggest questions I have is about fiber. We've always been told it's essential for good health, but some of the sources we looked at suggest that might not be the whole story.
Right, like Dr. Dennis Burkitt, he did some groundbreaking work in Africa and observed populations thriving on low-fiber diets, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
And Anthony Chaffee, MD, even mentioned a study suggesting that too much fiber could actually increase the risk of diverticulosis.
It's like everything we thought we knew is being turned upside down.
It really makes you wonder how much of what we've been told about nutrition is actually true and how much is influenced by, other factors.
Like what?
Well, one thing that stood out in a lot of our sources is the influence of big food, big agriculture, and big pharma on nutritional guidelines and research.
Ah, you're going there.
I mean, it makes you wonder, right? Are those guidelines really about optimizing our health, or are they protecting the interests of these giant industries?
That's a big question, and we'll dive into it more after the break. So yeah, the influence of these big industries is a huge topic.
It's kind of like, who can we trust?
Right. Like Nina Teichholz, her work exposing the influence of industry lobbies on dietary guidelines, that's some seriously eye-opening stuff.
Yeah, and then there's Dr. Ford Brewer, his analysis of that food compass thing, where it ranked processed cereals as healthier than eggs and beef.
Oh, I saw that. That was wild.
It just seems like, I don't know, the experts have a history of getting things wrong.
Yeah.
Like with fat,
Oh, yeah. For years, fat was the enemy.
Public enemy number one.
Yeah.
And now it's making a comeback as this essential nutrient.
It really shows you how much dietary dogma can shift over time.
Like Dr. Sean Baker talks about how the media often ignores studies that contradict the whole low-fat narrative. It all comes back to this idea that these health and nutrition studies are often funded by the very industries that stand to profit from certain outcomes. And meanwhile, we're seeing record high rates of sickness while these industries are raking in record profits.
It definitely makes you think.
It's like, are we being steered toward choices that benefit these industries more than our own health?
And let's not forget about lobbying. These industries spend a ton of money to influence government policies, to get subsidies, and to normalize standards that ultimately boost their bottom line.
It's a whole system, man.
It is, and that's why it's so important to be aware of these potential biases when we're trying to make sense of all the nutrition information out there.
We can't just blindly accept what we're told. We have to be critical thinkers and question everything.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about some potential downsides, the influence of these industries. But what about the good stuff? Like, what are the potential benefits of the carnivore diet? Especially for athletes, I'm curious about that. You mentioned earlier how some athletes have seen success with fat adaptation.
Yeah, like Georges St-Pierre, the MMA fighter, he found that shifting to a fat-adapted state where his body primarily uses fat for fuel instead of carbs, it actually boosted his endurance.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Is that something anyone can do? Or is it just for, like, elite athletes?
It's definitely not a quick fix. It takes a major change in your diet and lifestyle, and it takes time for your body to adapt to burning fat efficiently.
So you can't just wake up one morning and decide to run a marathon on a carnivore diet. Got it.
Right, it's a gradual process, and it might not be the best fit for every type of athlete or every sport.
Right, like sprinting a 100-meter dash probably needs a different fuel source than, say, a long-distance bike race.
Exactly. For short bursts of high-intensity exercise, carbs are still the go-to fuel source for most people. But for endurance activities, that's where fat adaptation can really change the game.
Makes sense. So fat adaptation, that's one potential benefit for athletes. What other benefits have researchers found with this diet?
Well, a lot of people who adopt the carnivore diet report improvements in their blood work and overall health markers.
Interesting.
Like Ken Berry, MD, he talks about better blood sugar control with lower A1C levels and improved insulin sensitivity.
That's huge, especially with so many people struggling with type 2 diabetes. Anything else?
Oh, yeah. There's also the potential impact on hormonal balance, especially for women with PCOS, a condition often linked to hormonal imbalances.
So it's not just about weight loss or athletic performance. It could actually help with some underlying hormonal issues.
Exactly. And some people even report improvements in gut health, particularly those dealing with inflammatory bowel disease.
Really?
Yeah.
I always thought cutting out all those plant-based foods, which we always associate with gut health, would make things worse.
It's surprising, right? But Dr. Ford Brewer, in his video, he talks about how reducing inflammation through a carnivore diet can actually provide relief from IBD symptoms.
That's wild. So maybe eliminating certain things that can trigger inflammation in the gut is actually the key for some people?
It definitely challenges our preconceived notions, and there's even more. Some people find that their migraines decrease after going carnivore.
Wow. The benefits seem to run the gamut.
Dr. Brewer suggests it might be because of the reduced inflammation and more stable blood sugar levels. But of course, as with any dietary change, it's super important to approach it carefully, do your own research, and talk to your doctor.
Could agree more. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Everyone's different. And speaking of individual responses, I'm curious about the psychological and social aspects of adopting such a restrictive diet. It's got to come with its own set of challenges and rewards.
Totally. We'll dig into that more when we come back.
All right, so we've talked about the history, the potential downsides, the benefits, even how it can impact athletes. But now I'm really curious about what it's actually like to live this way, the day-to-day reality of being a carnivore.
You know, one thing that really struck me as we were going through all these sources is the passion. People who follow the carnivore diet, they're not just like casually interested, they're all in.
It's like a whole lifestyle, right? More than just a diet.
Exactly. It's like they found this community, this tribe of like-minded people, and it gives them this sense of belonging.
Especially for those who've maybe struggled with their health for a long time or felt like no one understood their dietary choices. It's like they've finally found their people.
Yeah, exactly. And that feeling of connection can be so powerful. But it can also lead to challenges, especially when you're in social situations where food is a big part of it.
Like we talked about earlier, trying to navigate a dinner party or a restaurant menu on a strict carnivore diet can be tough, not to mention the potential for judgment from people who don't get it.
It's like anything that goes against the mainstream. People can be quick to judge without really trying to understand.
It's so important to be open-minded and respectful. You know, food choices are personal. What works for one person might not work for another.
Absolutely. It's all about finding what works best for you and respecting other people's choices, even if you don't agree with them.
Totally. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the carnivore diet, where do you see it fitting into the bigger picture of nutrition?
Ooh, that's a great question. It seems like there's so much conflicting information out there these days, it's hard to know what to believe.
Right. Like 1 minute something is good for you, the next minute it's bad.
Exactly. It's easy to get swept up in the latest trends and fads, but the key is to approach it all with a healthy dose of skepticism and to think critically.
And remember, nutrition science is always evolving. Like, think about how our understanding of fat has changed over time.
Oh, totally. Demonized for decades, and now it's making a comeback.
It just goes to show that we can't just take everything we hear at face value.
We have to question things, look at the research, and most importantly, listen to our own bodies.
So true. So, after all this, what are your main takeaways from our deep dive?
Well, for me, the carnivore diet is definitely fascinating, and it might have real benefits for some people, but it's clearly not for everyone. It's not a quick fix or a magic bullet.
And I think the big takeaway is that personalized nutrition is key.
100%. There's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to health and well-being. We have to be aware of the biases out there, do our own research, and make informed decisions that align with our own needs and values.
And maybe, just maybe, we need to rethink some of our assumptions about what a healthy diet really looks like. I mean, our ancestors thrived on meat for a long time, so who knows? Maybe there's something to this whole carnivore thing after all.
Something to think about, right?
Definitely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you learned some new things and, maybe even had your mind blown a little. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains buzzing.